From Interior Alaska's most trusted news source, this is the Fairbanks Evening News.
Good evening, Fairbanks, and thank you for joining us. Our top story this evening. Late this afternoon, officials were called to the scene of a two-car accident on the intersection of the Cease Highway and the Johansson Expressway.
That's right. Eyewitnesses at the scene said the accident happened quickly between a late-model Subaru and a Suzuki Sport utility vehicle. The two vehicles collided, causing a spin-out on the highway. Both vehicles involved did have airbags deploy, and injuries were reported in the wreck. Although the injuries were minor, not much is known about the cause of the accident, as police officers did receive conflicting information from the drivers on the scene.
Basically, we have a two-car accident. One car was making a left-hand turn onto the Johansson from the Cease northbound. The other car was coming straight through the intersection southbound. We're still not sure about the conditions of the lights at the time of the accident, but it's obvious somebody failed to yield.
It was very unexpected. I was just glad that everybody was okay. I immediately got out and made sure that the closest vehicle was okay. They were somewhat okay. There were some injuries, unfortunately, but everybody will be okay, so that's good.
Senator Lisa Murkowski today added language to the fiscal 2014 Defense Appropriations Committee report concerning the Stewart Creek 2 fire that occurred this summer out at Chena Hot Springs Road. Murkowski's measure would require the Army to explain why the live artillery exercise believed to have started the 85,000-acre fire was allowed to proceed. The committee directed the Army to review its procedures for determining when to postpone exercises due to wildfire risk and to report to the Congressional Defense Committees on its conclusions no later than April 15th. The Stewart Creek 2 wildfire, which threatened the Two Rivers residential community, has cost more than $19 million to date.
The official filing period for municipal election races opened today. Those wanting to run for offices in the borough or city of Fairbanks have until August 15th to sign up. The City of Fairbanks mayor's post is up for election this year. There are 3 open seats on the borough assembly and 3 on the school board. As of this afternoon, John Eberhardt and Vivian Stiver had filed to run for Fairbanks city mayor.
Federal and state officials, as well as Native leaders from around Alaska, will be in Fairbanks next week for a 3-day conference centered around the highly charged and at times controversial issue of tribal court development. Sponsored by the Tanana Chiefs Conference, among a host of other entities. The 30th Annual Alaska Tribal Court Development Conference will kick off Tuesday and run through Thursday at the Westmark Fairbanks Hotel. Started in 1984, the theme of this year's conference is Working Together for Healing and Justice. A number of judicial, child protective, and other officials will speak, with the primary focus being directed towards solving a long-standing communications disconnect between state officials and rural governments on issues surrounding tribal courts, among many other agencies.
I've been working in the villages for 34 years, and I think one of the most exciting things is to help the villages, to empower them to work with tribal courts to deal with their own issues, child protection and children's matters, domestic relations, and things that affect them, kind of local distribution of justice.
News Center 11's Daryl Lewis will have more on this story this weekend during the Saturday edition of the Fairbanks Evening News and News Center Final.
Alaska U.S. Senators Lisa Murkowski and Mark Begich, both scheduled speakers at next week's Tribal Justice Conference, today introduced legislation aimed at combating alcohol and drug abuse, as well as addressing rates of domestic violence and child abuse and neglect in rural communities. The Alaska Safe Families and Villages Act gives Alaska tribes more power to combat issues. That is according to a news release issued earlier today. Both Begich and Murkowski worked together over the past several months on the bill they introduced that encourages tribes and the state of Alaska to sign intergovernmental agreements relating to the enforcement and education of state laws in Alaska Native villages. It also authorizes the use of Department of Justice to make grants available to tribes for carrying out the agreements.
All right, well, when we come back, First Friday is tomorrow in Fairbanks, and Denali National Park has teamed up with local artists to bring an exhibit to the public.
Interesting. We also have our weekly barbecue report, and it's all about quiche. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Fairbanks Evening News. A team of students headed by UAF research professors John Dean and Peter Webley recently returned from a trip to Italy. Now, this trip wasn't all for pleasure. It was for a research project on active volcanoes, including the Stromboli volcano near Sicily. The purpose of the research is to test ways that are less expensive to collect data from active volcanoes using none other than webcams. By coupling the expensive cameras, which can cost in the tens of thousands of dollars, with inexpensive webcams, the data can then be compiled and compared and possibly used later in more remote locations, such as here in Alaska.
It is important to understand for eruption temperatures, as well as helping to determine eruption rates at volcanoes, and to help us overall monitor the behavior and help and aid in predictions of the behavior of volcanoes. So it's easy access, and also Stromboli as well as Etna are very active, and so it's a good place to calibrate those instruments to then later use them in more remote locations like some of the volcanoes that we have in the Aleutians in Alaska.
Oh, we will have more on the university's trip to Italy next week in That's Interiortainment.
The Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly is looking at a proposed bond package from the school district. Now, it would ask voters to approve $56 million worth of bonds. $37 million of it would go to expand Ryan Middle School. The rest would be used for a number of other smaller projects. The Assembly is expected to vote August 8th on whether to put it on the ballot.
Opening day of the Tanana Valley State Fair is tomorrow, and this year the fair is full of surprises. Apart from the paved walkways, rides, and food that most interior residents are looking forward to, this year the entertainment inside of the fair will be some you won't want to miss. Contests such as Fairbanks Has Talent, Dancing with the Fairbanks Stars, and much more will be held this year. However, some new and innovative contests are being introduced to the public with some really neat prizes to accompany them.
Well, we have a lot of really fun new special events at the fair this year. One of them is the Greatest Guitar Riff Competition, sponsored by Grassroots Guitar Company and Godin Guitars. Another wonderful new event is going to be the texting competition. So the texting competition is going to be on Tuesday night on Usabelli, and we're going to have a couple different competitions. They're going to have a very complicated paragraph that they have to text correctly, the fastest they can, and we'll have how many texts can you do in a certain amount of time.
We will have more on all things entertainment at the fair tonight on News Center Final in That's Interiortainment.
Tomorrow in the interior, First Friday will be held to celebrate the arts. It has become a tradition here in Fairbanks that many folks look forward to. The Bear Gallery inside of Pioneer Park will be hosting a special project on display beginning tomorrow and running through the month of August, which highlights predator relationships inside of Denali Park and Preserve. The title of the project, In a Time of Change, Trophic Cascades. This competitive exhibit required the artists as a group to get approval to go inside of the park to document life amongst the animals.
It was a competitive application for the artists, and they worked as a group and went out into the park to document the predator-prey relationships in the ecosystem and the impact on the ecosystem in Denali. And so what we'll see in the gallery is a collection of artwork that ranges from fiber, artisan crafted pieces, sculpture, that document those relationships in a very interesting way. So it's a beautiful marriage of the science and art of what we see happening in the park.
The sun is shining and the grills are burning. When one might think a certain food item can't be grilled, Dan Gilson does it. This week he cooks quiche in our Backyard Barbecue Report.
Afternoon, I'm Dan Gilson, the owner of the Charcoal Supply Company and the pitmaster of the Three Dogs Barbecue Competition cooking team. We're gonna do quiche. Who would have thought of doing quiche on the grill? But hey, we're gonna do it today. What I've got here are 4 eggs and about 1.5 cups of milk. We got those all mixed up. And then we're gonna add about a cup of cheese. I've got some grated cheddar here. We're gonna add, maybe a handful of mushrooms and some cubed ham. Mix this all together real well. And then we're going to dump it into our 9-inch, this is a frozen pie shell, but you can make your own if you'd like. Okay, once we get it all into that 9-inch pie shell, homemade, or in this case, frozen, Put it in your grill. Again, we're going to use that offset kind of cooking, or that indirect cooking. We're going to cook it for 350 degrees, 375 degrees for about an hour, maybe 45 minutes. All you want to do is cook it until it's set and kind of brown on top. And there you have quiche on the grill. This has been the Backyard Barbecue Series, and I'm Dan Gilson.
Brought to you by the Charcoal Supply Company.
Don't mind us, Joe. We're just practicing for the texting competition. I'm going to win.
And speaking at the same time competition.
Speaking of competitions, what's coming up next? Baseball, right?
Yeah, the Gold Panthers won the ABL title in the regular season. And the tournament has been a bit tougher. Opponents have required some extra attention as well. So you guys are continuing to text, get your practice in. Also, a local icon in sports media will ride off into the sunset tomorrow. We'll be talking about Bob Ely and more next in sports. Hello, Interior sports fans. Joe Cook here in the sports seat for you this evening, and it's time for some Thursday sports. They say lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place. Well, it does in sports. The Gold Panthers were in a dogfight last night, but the Mat-Su Miners got a little revenge with a 6-4 win in a game that went 12 innings. With 2 outs in the last inning, Christian Stewart of the Miners hit a 2-run homer to win the game. Now today, the Gold Panthers had another extra inning game, this time against the Glacier Pilots, who won their first 2 games of the tournament. This game was tied at 4-all at the end of 8, just like the Mat-Su game. And just like that Mat-Su game, lightning shocks the Panthers. Pilot center fielder Micah Green hits a 3-run home run in the bottom of the 10th with 2 outs to give the Pilots a 7-4 victory. The Gold Panthers are now 1-2 in the round-robin ABL tourney and will face the winless Chinooks tomorrow at 3 p.m. The American Legion State Tournament champions could be decided today. South Post 4 and Chugiak Post 33, the top teams in the tournament, faced off. South came in not giving up a run in 19 innings, while Chugiak outscored opponents 26-6. But South won 7-4. The Wolverines trailed 2-1 going into the 4th, but put a 6th spot in the bottom of the 4th to gain control. Chugiak was undefeated coming in, so South has to win one more game in order to win the American Legion title. The champion will represent Alaska at the Northwest Region 7 tournament in Eugene, Oregon, starting August 8th. The runner-up will play in the NW Kart tournament in Wheatland, Wyoming on August 9th. Now, remember when you were a kid and did something wrong and your parents said, "Tell me the truth and you won't get in trouble," but you knew you were going to get punished anyway? That's almost like the fiasco in New York with Major League Baseball, the Yankees, and Alex Rodriguez. The league is almost ready to come down with the decision on punishment for A-Rod and his alleged use of performance-enhancing drugs, possibly as soon as this week. A-Rod is expected to be in New York tomorrow. Kurt Gregory has the latest.
Baseball superstar Alex Rodriguez has a choice from Major League Baseball. Strike a deal for a long-term suspension, or they will ban him from the sport for life.
The general sense is that, it would be a very good time to retire, take the ban and go.
The 38-year-old Yankee will learn his fate sometime this week. Rodriguez has vowed to appeal any decision by Major League Baseball, reportedly to save the remainder of his contract, $114 million over 5 years. The suspension and possible lifetime ban stems from an investigation into the now closed Biogenesis clinic that supplied players with performance-enhancing drugs. A-Rod has admitted to using steroids in the past, but insists he has not used any PEDs since. The New York Daily News reports that baseball's internal investigation turned up emails, text messages, and evidence that Rodriguez interfered with the investigation.
He has put himself into this situation. Everybody's closing in on him. I don't know if he can get out of this time.
One of the most famous men to don the Yankee pinstripes has hit 647 home runs in 19 seasons, but hasn't played a game all year and is expected to make about $28 million this season. Kurt Gregory, NBC News.
And finally tonight, a time for reflection. One of the pillars in local sports media is putting the pen down. Bob Ely, sports editor of the Fairbanks Daily News Miner, will leave the paper for good tomorrow at midnight after his last night shift. In his last column today, Ely said he will still be in Fairbanks after retiring from the News Miner this weekend. Retiring after 33 years of sports writing, Ely said his philosophy was that he worked for the readers and the players he covered. He said he looks forward to being a fan again, participate in the Alaska International Senior Games, and possibly run the Equinox Marathon. Ely also wrote he will enjoy his garden and still carry on his tradition in May with his infamous Bob OQ. You can catch Bob at the Big I on August 9th at 5 p.m. for his celebration as well. And a last note, you can sign up for the 2014 Yukon Quest this Saturday at the Yukon Quest office in downtown Fairbanks from 2 to 4 and the White Horse office from 3 to 5. You can get an entry packet at the Yukon Quest website or in person at the offices. The 2014 purse is now $115,000. And that'll do it for sports tonight. Thanks for rocking with me for a little while. For more KTF sports, just go to Twitter, YouTube, webster11.com. You can also get our app. Stay cool, Alaska. Mike Schultz has your full weather forecast coming up next, and we'll catch you next time.
Welcome back to Fairbanks Evening News. We said earlier, tomorrow the fair kicks off, and wearing their theme this year, Salmon Chanted Evening. Stephanie, I'll be there tomorrow night kicking things off. We'll have a chance to interview the general manager and talk about some other things that are going on. And